Hey everyone, I'm sitting on my leather recliner in my living room in front of my 70-inch TV, as comfortable as I possibly can be, because I'm about to talk to you about some reasons why you shouldn't go to jail. My name is Phil, and you're listening to The Lip. Well, some of you who have been listening for a while knew that I had a segment about I guess a year ago or so that I was doing, and it was focused on reasons why one should not go to jail. Turns out that I stopped that segment just before football season last year because, well, I wanted to do some football picks. And having thought about it for a while, I really did a show about almost all of my other segments before. I did a show about um, the words of wisdom, probably maybe 2 years or so ago. You can find that on the Spotify archives. And I thought that was a pretty fun show to do. So, on that same note, I thought another segment that was pretty cool that I have a lot of notes from would be a good idea to actually have a whole show about. And thus, I'm going all in on not going to jail, or I should say, reasons why you should not go to jail. It's not really hard to state the obvious. Why would you want to be in jail? There's really no redeeming things about being in jail. Although, in truth, I actually did know one inmate who happened to have been in jail, and it was saving his life. Turns out, the second he got out of jail, somebody that he had some, how could we say, not so good dealings with, ended up, well, taking him out as soon as he got out of jail. So for him, technically speaking, being in jail was a good thing. But for the average person, no, there's really nothing good about it at all. And I'm about to describe to you, I don't know, 8, 10 different reasons why you shouldn't go to jail, maybe even a few more, based on the segment that I did, like I said, a year ago. I think this show will be fun because it's going to revisit those topics that I haven't thought about in a while. And I think it's a real fun way to sort of let people know that when I was walking the halls of the prison that I worked in, that I realized that it was not a fun place to be, even for the people who work there. Yeah. You may get paid to be there, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's a place that you want to be. That's just what it is. If other places paid that kind of money, I think that plenty of other people would probably want to do it something else. The average person wouldn't be able to work in a jail. It's just a fact. Can't be upset about it, but it's the truth. In fact, of that fact, one of the things that training sergeants and training officers would tell new people who come to the jail, if you can't handle it, don't feel bad about it. It's not for everyone. It really isn't. You won't know until you get in there. It's just that simple. Once you walk through those doors and get behind those gates, the truth will come out. You will either be able to handle it or you won't, because there is a certain price that you have to pay in order to work in a jail for any length of time. You're just going to pay a price. The longer you work there, the price is going to be there. And trust me, there is a price. There absolutely is. You may not think it at first, but trust and believe there is a price. And you'll know it when the bill comes due. Absolutely 100%. Jail, not a fun place at all. But now it's time to fill in the blanks. I pretty much stated the question that I was going to put out for the blanks. What was my favorite part about being in jail while working there? Well, some would say that that blank could be filled in with, I got to leave every day. But truthfully, my favorite part about being in jail, there was no favorite part about being in jail. None. There was absolutely none. Because I can certainly tell you that I mentioned it earlier, there is a price to pay, even if you work in the jail. You will get it. I'm not going to go into details on that right now, but maybe I will elaborate later on. But there's absolutely a price that you pay. And because of that price, at the end of the day, was it really worth it? Maybe, maybe not. But certainly, knowing that there was a price to pay after being there for a while, I can certainly say that the best part of being in jail, there isn't any, not one. That's the blank that was filled in right now. Now, we're going to go into the main event. Don't go to jail. Let's break out little notes here. Usually, you don't get to see me holding the notes, but for the most part, you're going to have an opportunity to see me do it every once in a while. I showed you my notes. Well, at least some of them anyway. The first thing I was going to get into is, well, the fact that your whole livelihood is based on a 12 by 6 cell. And usually, I'm going to say, good 90% of the time, you're going to be in that 6 by 12 cell with another individual. Obviously, if it's a male prison, you're going to be in there with another guy. Female prison, you're going to be in there with another female. But that 6 by 12 living space that you've got, that's all you got. Granted, you're going to be able to go out in the day room when you're allowed to be out. You'll get to go yard, maybe gym, depending on the day, depending on what's going on. But for the most part, your entire existence while you're in jail or prison is going to be in that small 12 by 6 cell. And again, you're going to usually have somebody in there with you. Now, to give you a quick and rough idea, for those of you who have never been in jail and hopefully never will be in jail, not even to have to visit somebody. To give you an idea of what those jail cells kind of feel like, imagine an average bathroom with the tub. And imagine having to take every possession that you have and you have to store it inside that bathroom. So, first of all, you're not going to have a whole lot of stuff. And second of all, there's going to be another person in there has to put stuff in there as well. So think about that. Those kind of close quarters are going to be real cramped if you have a few boxes of things, but you're not going to have a whole storage unit or a whole house worth of stuff to fit inside that 12 by 6, not even close. So right away, you know that you're going to have to downsize greatly. And on top of that, there's plenty of stuff that you're not even going to be able to have in that cell. So right away, my first thought, And I mean, absolute first thought about not wanting to go to jail is having to be in that 6 by 12 cell for roughly the majority of the day, because there's plenty of chunks of time that you're out. But if you add them all together, most of the time you're in that cell with the other person. Nah, I'll pass. And I imagine that most of you should as well. Another problem that I would certainly say that most of you would not want to appreciate by being in jail, that is the food. Let's just say there are no Michelin star chefs preparing the food in jail. Now, I don't know about you, but the prison that I worked in did not have Emeril Lagasse or Gordon Ramsay as the head chef with an army of sous chefs who were trained and prepared and ready to cook the most excellent meals you could possibly have. Nah, nah. Truth be known, I actually had a thought in my mind to transfer from being a corrections officer to being one of the people who ran the kitchen. It's a different segment of the jail. You're still part of you're still considered an officer, but instead of being in direct security, now you're working with the food. And yes, I actually qualified to do so, but then I changed my mind and said I want to stay where I was. I wanted to continue to be a CEO. But to let you know, my qualifications that allowed me to even entertain that were the fact that I worked at Wawa for as long as I did. And I had been a food handler. So as a result of that, I was qualified to help people in the kitchen. Now, as far as the workers that you get, 100% of the ones that I knew did the job because they could make a little money, and I mean a little money. We'll get into that a little bit later. I think I put that on my list. But let's just say the money that they make mirrored the food that they made. Because the prison that I worked at only used the finest ingredients sourced from the cheapest locations possible. So we're not talking about quality food. Is it edible? Yes. Is it safe? Yes. Did the superintendent, for those of you who don't know, the warden of the jail, actually taste the food from time to time to make sure that it wasn't too bad? And the answer is yes. I witnessed that a couple times where I saw the superintendent go into the kitchen to taste the food to make sure that it was at least marginally acceptable. And they're like, okay, I'm not vomiting, so this will work. Considering that was the standard that they used, I should tell you about how great the food was. Now, on that same note, you got to remember, we're not talking about, like I said, the most skilled chefs in the world. These people pretty much were doing a job. Some of them were voluntold to work there. Some of them volunteered. And some of them have never cooked in their life. Had no idea. Others were actually pretty good cooks, and they knew their way around a kitchen a little bit. But we're still not talking about the very best of the best. And sadly, the meals that they made did not look appetizing. Sometimes they were edible, and the best part about those food that was in the prison was the same food that was served to the inmates was also the stuff that they gave the employees for free. So if you wanted to eat that, you could. Now, I don't know about other prisons that are around, but the one that I worked at, you were not allowed to leave for lunch. You were not allowed to bring lunch in. You had to eat what was in there or not eat at all, for the most part. So you had to partake in what was there. Fortunately, they had some vending machines, and you could pick and choose what you were going to eat out of that. Sometimes they had semi-acceptable food, like for me, with the diet that I was on, the regiment that I was working on. I would eat a lot of dry pasta for two reasons. Number one, you really can't get it wrong, and number two, it was the only thing that satisfied um, my requirements. So that's what I ate. Other people would eat all the other stuff they made. A lot of grilled cheese. Sometimes they had this meat sauce. Yeah, yeah. Occasionally they had some macaroni and cheese. They made some stuff that was, if you were at home and you were cooking it, it would definitely be 100 times better. But considering the fact that they gave us really rotten food as the officers, and that was the best quality that you're going to get, the stuff that they gave us, but it's still the same stuff. They just, instead, I guess you could say, they made a big pot of pasta, let's say, and they had the sauce. The sauce that tasted a little better is the stuff they gave the officers, and the rest they gave to the inmates. High standards all around. High standards all around. Whew. We're going to talk about privacy now. 100%. If you have the expectation of privacy, get that thought out of your head. Forget it. First of all, like I already said, your living quarters are going to be a 12 by 6. And in that 12 by 6, you're going to have to share space with another inmate. And in that shared space, you're going to have to remember that you have all day long, all night long with this person. Now, the bathroom situation, there is a rule that you cannot cover your cell door, window, and you can't cover anything so that the officer can't see inside the cell. We have to be able to see inside the cell clearly at all times. So there is a rule, and that's a rule that we have to maintain. People would sometimes put a sheet up between themselves and the toilet so they have some little bit of privacy from the other inmate who was in the cell with them at the same time. But of course, the officers would have to knock on the doors. They take the sheet down because we don't know what's happening behind the sheet. Thus, you can't have the sheet up. So you're a little bit of privacy separating you and the other inmate who are using the bathroom. You can't do it. You just can't do it. Sorry, but you can't. The best time that I would say to use the bathroom would be during one of those time periods when the inmates are free and loose and you can go around inside the block. Or if there's um, yard and you don't want to go, or the other guy wants to go to gym or he has some class, then you have time to actually have a little bit of privacy, but very minuscule. Because, like I said, you still can't cover the window. It's just going to be you in the cell as opposed to you and the other guy. The officer can still has to walk around and look inside to make sure that you're not doing anything illegal or hurting yourself. So the privacy aspect, there's really no such thing. I mean, even the showers, there is, well, again, in the jail that I worked in, each block, the big blocks had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They had 12 showers on the block. And the showers were separated from the cells, but not by far. they were still on the block. And in order to use the shower, you had to go from your cell to the shower, use the shower, and then you had to leave from the shower back to your cell. Now, the trickiest part about that is there's rules about that too. Doesn't matter that there's old guys around. The major rule is you can't walk around the block at any time without a shirt on. You got to make sure you have a shirt on when you leave. So you got to bring all your stuff with you into the shower, take the shower, and go back to your cell to dry off. If you're going to do lotion, powder, whatever you're going to do, hopefully your cellmate is not in the cell, or maybe they are. And if so, there's nothing you can really do. If they don't want to leave the cell, because it's their cell as well as yours, you're just going to have to sort of man up and locker room it. That ultimately is what it comes down to. Plus the fact that you have your stuff in the cell. All your clothes, sometimes you can have some electrical equipment. Like some inmates had radios and TVs and even guitars, and I believe a couple of guys had keyboards, music keyboards. And in that frame, I mean, you can't just be playing that stuff as loud as you want because there is another guy or potentially a woman, depending on your prison, in your cell. So you got to make sure you have time to do that stuff. Like you're not going to be able to do it while the other person's in there, and you're not going to be able to have the volume as loud as you want. You're not going to be able to just play whenever you want because you don't want to get on the nerves of the person you're stuck in the cell with. You just don't. You just don't. Privacy with your food that you may purchase from commissary. Stuff can be in a locker that you have if you have a lock. Even if you do, somebody might try to break your lock. The guy who's with you, I mean, you don't know. He could be watching for your combination so he can find out exactly what it is. Just steal all your stuff. There is no privacy. You have to simply hope that they don't steal it. And I do mean hope because sometimes I'll be perfectly honest. When when an officer goes to a block to work that block, and this is that privacy issue, but at the same time, it becomes difficult. Let's say you were working a block for the first time and you hadn't worked that block. You're not going to know who is who for the most part, unless you saw a guy walking around while you were throughout the jail. You're also not going to know who lives where. So, unbeknownst to you as an officer, some dude could walk up to you and say, "Hey, can you pop my cell?" And you've never been on that block and you don't know who it is. And he gives you a cell number. And 9 times out of 10, there's usually 8, 10 people who are coming up to the desk asking you different things at once on a new block because they know you have been there. So you're going to say, "What's your cell number?" They're going to tell you. You're going to hit the button. In all truth, do you really know if that's that guy's cell? You really have no idea. No clue. The officer is simply like, "Okay, I'm going to open the cell. Shut your door when you get done." You usually tell them. Or shut it behind them, depending on how you want to go. But you could be putting somebody inside that cell that doesn't live there, and they could just take everything they want. You have no idea. So your sense of privacy was just violated as an inmate. How are you going to know? You're not going to know. It just makes it terrible. So again, that sense of privacy, there just isn't any. Isn't any at all. Keys, while you're in jail. It sounds weird for me to say this, but hear me out. This is one that I find very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. To the point where it's like, it took me a little while to really feel and appreciate this one. A reason why you don't go to jail is because of keys. Why do I say that? Well, one of the things that an inmate is not supposed to have are keys, for obvious reasons. They can't have the keys to their cell. Clearly, that's just stating the obvious. Even the locks that they have are only combination locks. They don't have keys to the combination locks. So they just have combinations. No keys to their locks, for their lockers. What this is it's a mind melting thought process, because really think about how weird that this sounds. As I'm presenting it doesn't seem like a big deal. But when I'm done presenting it, unless you remember me telling you about this on my Don't Go to Jail segment, you might not fully be able to appreciate what I'm about to say about this. When you have keys out here in the real world, what can you do with those keys? You can open doors. Yes. You can get into lockers, drawers, what have you. But what is the purpose for why you need to have that key? You need it to open things, yes. But there's more. There's more, there's more, there's more. While you have the key, nobody else can get into what it is that you locked on a normal basis. Just the key, right? Now, this is where I want to blow your mind. That means when you have the key, you have control over what's being locked up. You have control of what you're using. When you have the key to a car, you control the car. Unless you're some kind of car thief, this is your level of control over your vehicle. When you have a key to your house, you control who comes in and who goes out. Key to your bedroom, key to your safe, you control who can go in and out of that. Key to your office, nobody gets in there without you. Keys mean control. And when that epiphany hit me, I had to immediately put it into the reasons why you shouldn't go to jail, because what you've done by telling an inmate that they cannot have keys, that means they don't have control. All the officers have one thing: they got keys. Depending on which place that they're working at during the jail, they have different sets of keys for different reasons. But the keys mean you can control who goes in and out. You can make that decision. You can open the door. You can lock the door. You can allow somebody to go in, or you can allow somebody, or you can prevent somebody from going in. By not having keys is a mental set of control that people don't even think about a lot of times. You don't, because now these inmates cannot have keys of any type. Personal, obviously, they're not going to have keys to the jail, obviously, but they can't have keys to their car that they had before they got locked up. They can't have those keys. Because keys just mean control. And when you take somebody's keys, You, in a very interesting way, have now taken their control. And the fact that all the officers and all the employees have these sets of keys, it's almost another way to show the inmate that they have no control. And those people, the corrections officers, the other administrative people who have the keys, are in complete control. That just makes you feel helpless after a while realizing it, because I've seen plenty of inmates who are lifers, and that's what made me think of this. For the rest of their life, because they're never getting out of jail, they will never have a key in their possession. And if you don't have a key, that means that one thing that's behind that lock that you can open, you decide fully who can get in, who can get out. You control the destiny, but you have no control because you have no keys. Just that one always hits hard when I really thought about it. And that was maybe it took me working in the prison for 3 years before I thought of that. And now it just blows my mind when I think about it still. No keys, no control. Just crazy to think about that. Truly crazy to think about. Well, I think we'll have a little bit of fun now that I just sort of like gave myself that epiphany all over again, talking about the keys. I'm going to talk about one of my favorite, yet least favorite things on earth: hooch. Jail alcohol. My goodness. This is a reason why you should not go to jail. Now, me, I don't drink at all. Never drank a drop. But trust and believe when I tell you, anybody out there who enjoys alcohol will certainly think twice about going to jail. For one, obviously, alcohol is not allowed in the jail. So, creative individuals will make their own alcohol. And at least in the prisons that I worked at, the prison I worked at, they call it hooch. Now, for the most part, what they do is have some sugar, some bread that they didn't eat, but they just kept, and they ferment fruit and create the juice out of it. And next thing you know, you let it sit there and let it ferment, and then it becomes alcohol. That's one way to do it. Another horrible thing that these inmates were doing, which was absolutely mind blowing until um, the major, who was the top corrections officer in the jail, described to us another thing that the inmates were doing, and they only started doing that in response to the COVID era situation. What they would do is they would take hand sanitizer, because we had hand sanitizer in very large containers so that everybody in the block could use it to keep their hands clean, try to keep away from getting COVID. What some of these dudes would do is they would steal the entire jug of hand sanitizer and they would boil the hand sanitizer. And what they would do now, yeah, I'm saying boil it. How do you boil hand sanitizer in jail? That's another story altogether. It's all about the way they cook inside their cells, but that's, again, another conversation. Let's just say they can, in fact, heat up stuff very hot to the point of boiling. Let's just put it that way. And what these guys would do is they would boil the hand sanitizer to a point where there would be soap that would come up from the hand sanitizer. And what they would do is they would just siphon off all the soap get rid of all the soap. And what was left was alcohol. And these guys would drink that. Truly insane. If you want to talk about alcoholics, that's absolutely the nature of it. A simple fact that they would go ahead and they would boil hand sanitizer to get alcohol. That's another level. That's another level. Hmm. But now back to the fruit juice hooch or jail alcohol or wine, whatever you want to call it, right? Now, the first time I ever experienced that stuff, I could only hope that it would be the last time. And for the most part, I ran into it a few times. These guys would make gallons of this stuff. And some of them would hide it around the block and they would drink it and they'd be drunk. But the trick is, like, regular alcohol is one thing, but hooch, it is the most rancid smelling stuff ever. It just stinks. And I'm not saying that from the perspective of somebody who does not drink alcohol. I'm saying that from somebody who's got a nose and olfactory senses that actually work. It has a putrid smell to it. It absolutely does. And it's so strong that you'll notice it if you walk past the cell when somebody is making it or somebody is drinking it. You will be able to tell because the odor will go right through and it'll hit you and almost knock you out. Trust me when I tell you, it is foul, beyond foul. And these guys will guzzle that stuff like it was lemonade. Ugh, it is just putrid. And like I said, the first time I ever encountered it, we found some guy who was making it, and a more veteran officer than I had said, "Have you ever smelled it before?" He's like, "No." Hey, come here. I walked over, and there it was. Bang! I felt like Mike Tyson punched me in the face. It hit so hard. I can't imagine drinking that stuff. I just can't. I can't. Like, I can't. It's literally the epitome of drinking out of a used toilet. It just, I can't imagine. But if you need that alcohol, apparently you'll do whatever it takes to get it, and that's what it takes. And trust me, if there was a reason why you shouldn't go to jail, especially if you drink, hooch, that jailhouse alcohol, nope. That's an absolute reason why you don't want to go at all to jail. Whew, my goodness. Well, the other one is sort of lack of independence. I pretty much have gone through that with everything else I've gone through so far. I mean, no keys, no independence. You don't have that control. You're inside of a cell with somebody else. You can't really do everything you want to do because you are incarcerated. You only have so much that you're allowed to do. And even still, when you're allowed to do it, you are dependent on other people in order to be able to do those things. For example, when I was talking about showers, if you're in a situation where you're in your cell and you have to go to you want to use the shower, you can only use the shower at certain times. You can shower every day, but it's only certain times you can go do it. And you are at the mercy of the officer who will tell you when it's your turn. Phone calls, there's a list, and and you can only use the phone for so long, and you got to be on the list. If you're not on a list, you can't use the phone. You don't have the ability to just walk up to a phone and make a phone call. Mm-mm. Can't do that. You are absolutely at the mercy of other people if you need to and go to see a doctor because the officer has to then tell you that you've got to sign a piece of paper, fill it out, put that paper inside of the mailbox. Then the mail has to come picked up, and then the people who you want to see, the doctor, say the eye doctor or a dentist, then has to set up the appointment. This could take a while because they only come certain days as well. So you're all at their mercy. You got to wait until they say you can. I personally don't like to have to do that. If there's something I want to do or if there's something I need to do, I want to be able to do it and not have to wait. But if you're in jail, you ain't got no choice. You gotta wait. There is no two ways about it. None at all. It's like this is what it is. Deal with it. Not a fun situation to be in. I'm moving a little quicker now. Um, this one goes to my guy Patrick Houston of Zenith Transportations and Houston's Hustle Hobby. This absolutely goes to him. And if I remember correctly, I think when we did our show, I did. I had a don't go to jail specifically for him because he is absolute tech guy. He loves it through and through the core, and he is up on the latest technology, especially when it comes to smart houses. Which every time I watch his channel, it seems like something that he just talked about before has changed, and he's updating what he already talked about. So like this stuff just keeps moving faster and faster and faster. In fact, I actually was fortunate enough to win my Alexa from a contest that he had. I can promise you right now that the worst thing that could ever happen to him would be to go to jail because of the fact that things change so quickly on the outside and they virtually stand still on the inside. They just don't move. Like for example, um, one of the things that inmates would have to do is they would have to download music onto their tablets and boy, those things are absolutely 100%, sounds weird to say, Stone Age and tablet in the same sentence because, well, I'm a 47-year-old guy. Those things did not exist. But for so long, it seems like they were yesterday, those things came out. But boy, the technology is completely different. Like some of these guys who went to jail 20, 25 years ago, the phone that they had back then, state of the art. Right now, it probably wouldn't even store what I say, a quarter of the information that the phones today will use. I mean, good grief. I'm recording this show on a phone. I am recording this show on a phone. 25 years ago, that would have been completely unheard of. The thing that they called uh, a camera phone back then versus these things now, like camera phone was the greatest thing that ever came out in year 2000. Right now, there's not even a distinction. These things take such good pictures and video that they're almost better than the old school camcorders that used to be around. Look them up, kids. It's worth a Google. Camcorders. But technology changes so greatly. Like, even a perfect example of technology changing quickly is just in the auto industry. I mean, I actually stepped away from the auto industry in 2016, and I guarantee you that there are things that I will not touch at all unless you give me, I don't know, a month to actually do some stuff and work on some things and see how things work now. There's stuff I won't touch. Like my personal favorite is the lane departure system. Now, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I was an ASE certified tech with an ASE in steering and suspension. That was kind of my specialty. I could put in struts and shocks and deal with the rack and pinion steering unit and tie rod ends and alignments, tires, power steering stuff. That's what I was. That was my point of expertise. That's what I did. Right now, you have cars with, like I said, the lane departure system, which means that there's cameras and hooked into computers, which tells you when your car is drifting too far out of lane, or if you're too close to somebody in the front, or if somebody's behind you. They tell you all that stuff. Now, having said that, and I know I'm deviating a little bit, but it's still on point. If I were to say see a car that I picked up on a lift, shook it down, and determined that it needed a new tie rod end back in 2016, I'd be like, all right, needs a tie rod end and needs an alignment. Done and done. Now, I haven't worked on these cars, but I can guarantee you, if I felt the bad tie rod end, I would be like, uh oh, we got to figure this thing out because these lane departure systems have to be integrated into the steering and suspension components, the hard parts, what we used to call it, because those are the things you used to bang with hammers in order to get loose. Now, still think you bang that stuff with a hammer, but the real catch is, for me anyway, 10 years later almost, because of lane departure systems, if I were to pull that tie rod end off, it's already bad enough that you know you absolutely have to realign a car after you take the tie rod end off. But is there some computer integration to that lane departure system if I was to mess with a tie rod end? Would I mess that up? I wouldn't know if I were in jail for 20 years. The technology has changed. And like I said, Patrick, I hate to say this, but it's the truth. I love the guy to death. But if he was in jail, knowing that things are going to move past what he already knows, he would wither up and die. He wouldn't survive the fact that he would not be able to be right there in the technological in the world of technology that we live in, and as it continues to progress. And I definitely believe that that's a big time reason why you don't want to go to jail because the technology just changes so quickly, and it changes so fast. Like tomorrow, there's probably going to be something new, and especially like right now, like I'm even doing this show, and it's September 3rd, 2025. This show is going to release a couple days from now, 6th of September, and I imagine that there's going to be already different stuff going on that hadn't even happened yet. Stay out of jail because stuff changes just too fast. Just too fast. Um, I think I'm gonna skip that one. I'm gonna go all the way to the next one. Look at, ooh, yeah, ooh, yeah. We're gonna talk about that one. Ooh, tattoos. I don't have any. I thought about it once for a little while, and then the thought came to me, what do I want to get? And I started thinking about it. And I was, well, we get one. And then I thought about it, and then all of a sudden I had four ideas. And I went, but no, I want one. If I'm only get one, and I can't make up my mind, and it's going to be permanent, I'll be mad that I didn't get the other one. Well, I can get A. Now, it's not anything that you're supposed to do in jail, which is give people tattoos, get written up for it, thrown in the hole, and for obvious reasons. My favorite is the fact that what they do in order to use, or what they do to make the tattoos, like the ink comes from somewhere, and more interestingly enough, not just the ink, but the tattoo gun itself. What are they using for a tattoo gun? Well, let me tell you. 9 times out of 10, it's a sewing needle and a fan motor. And they construct these tattoo guns with the fan motors and sewing needles. It's all very complex, really. I mean, it sounds simple. It sounds complex, but it sounds simple, but it's really not. It's actually very advanced. And many people would say at this point in time, the old adage, only if they use their powers for good instead of evil. Because, I mean, these guys take a fan, an existing fan, take it apart, and they create a tattoo gun with it. That's pretty impressive. I'm not going to hold back on that. That's pretty impressive. But the fact that you would go and trust somebody who 9 times out of 10 is not an actual tattoo artist, but somebody who wants to become one. Granted, a lot of these guys are very talented artists. I've seen some of those things that they've drawn, and then I've seen some of the tattoos that they've given people. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. But we're not talking about using gloves. Inmates don't typically have access to gloves. We're not talking about having access to sanitary workstation. Because you can't just do a tattoo out there in the day room. You're going to do it inside your cell, that 12 by 6. Now, 12 by 6, how clean is it? How many times have you used that same needle on other guys? These are all questions that have no answers that I actually want to know. I would just pretend that I don't know. And of all the things that were confiscated from inmates that I've seen and have had to deal with, the most vile and disgusting are the tattoo guns because that's literally hepatitis in your hand. Like, why would you want to mess with that thing? Why would you let somebody do that to you? It just, there's just too many things that are going to go bad as opposed to what could be good about getting a tattoo in jail. There just really, really is. And it's just, ugh, it's nauseating enough for me to just say that's more than enough reason why not to go to jail. The tattoos, man. It's just horrible, the idea behind it. Well, I have two more that I'm going to give you, and then I'm going to shut this down. One is going to be right here, right now, that I was talking to the artist at her interview that I did with her. Great show. Of course, it's Patrick Houston's wife, Yolanda. Incredible artist, just innovative lady. Put together an amazing art show that I went to. It was a lot of fun. In fact, I should have worn that shirt while I was doing this because it's a great reason why not go to jail. In fact, I actually did my very last Don't Go to Jail segment with her as my guest. And The reason why I chose her to do the last segment was because it was something that was really interesting and it would probably be extremely, extremely problematic for her as an artist. When I was at prison at the end, before I left, working as a CO, it turns out that there was an administration change. Now, when I was there were murals all over the walls, all over the wall. But the administration came and they changed, and what they did was they covered all the murals, every single bit of art that was on the walls. They got rid of it all, and there was some pretty elaborate stuff on the walls. There really was. There was a scene of where somebody had painted the skyline of Philadelphia. There was multiple Marvel and Star Wars and DC characters on different blocks. There was trains that were painted inside a certain block. I mean, the walls were not dull. They were not boring. They were art. There was art everywhere, and some very good artists. Back to the tattoos. Some very good artists put in a lot of time to put that stuff up there, and then they painted it over. Now, Yolanda, if she had seen that they were painting over all that artwork, even though it wasn't hers, she wouldn't be able to take it. That would be the number one reason why she would not be able to go to jail. And I thought that that one definitely needed to be in this show. But for the final piece that I want to talk about, lockdown. Ooh, boy, lockdown. When the shift commander finds that there's a reason that there is going to be some sort of imminent fight between two gangs, or if there was a fight on a block, or there is a worldwide pandemic, they lock down the jail. Literally what it sounds like. Every inmate in their cell can't come out for anything. And you're stuck there for what is an indefinite period of time until they usually if it's a full lockdown, we're talking about the superintendent or the warden would issue it. If it's on a regular day, the jail can be locked down by the shift commander, which would be a captain, and depending on the circumstances, would depend on how long the lockdown would last. Now, in that situation, all meals, which we're now back to that point now after COVID, there's no longer a chow hall, which is a totally different thing that I need to get into one day. But all meals are taken to the inmates. Any medical, like if you need medicine during what would usually be what we call pill line or medication line, instead of going to the nurse's station to get it, all medicine would be taken to the blocks, and you're just in your cell. Usually, if the lockdown is for several days, I think it's after like 2 or 3 days. I don't quote me on how many days it is. A rotation begins where inmates are allowed to leave their cell to shower and then make phone calls on a short basis. I think they're allowed to make phone calls in order to make sure that their people know that they're okay. But boy, lockdowns are just terrible because now you're in the cell. Whatever you didn't get, say commissary, you're just beat because you can't get out, can't get it. Commissary will then, again, after a couple days, excuse me, they will then come to the block and distribute the stuff from commissary. But it's not a good situation. There is no yard, there is no gym, there is no school, there is nothing except for the lockout. And who benefits from that? Some would say, oh, well, the officers have an easy time when there is no inmates out. Wrong. In fact, those are the worst days for the officers, especially the ones who were in positions like me. I was a corridor officer at the end before I moved overnight, which means I worked in a hallway. I wasn't on a block. And that made for a miserable experience for the officers, even. Because, like I said, all the meals had to get taken to the inmates. All the medication had to be taken to the inmates. Commissary, after a certain period of time, had to be taken to the inmates. Showers were then scheduled on a certain rotation. Phone calls as well. It was just terrible. So why was it so hard? Well, who do you think brought the food up? The officers. Who do you think had to escort the nurses who distributed the medication? The officers. We had to do 10 times more work when there was lockup. Who took out the trash? The officers. We had to take out all the trash. And it was usually the ones, like I said, who were me and others who were like me, who either worked in the corridor or were utility, so that they were not on a block, but they were floating around the jail as needed, or certain posts that put them outside of a block. We had to do a lot of work those days. Whew, boy, we did a lot of work those days. But truthfully, I can only tell you that lockdowns are not fun. As an inmate, you would have so little fun. It was, like I said, the first day or two, there are no showers yet. It's after that, if memory serves me right. I think it was after. I think it was after, if the lockdown lasts more than 2 days. Don't quote me on it, but I know that it was a while. It was like 2 days before the showers were allowed to be given, because at that point the institution was that they would have to just take bird baths inside their cells. But after, I think it was after 2 days, then they would be able to take a full shower, which of course was a long, arduous process. And hopefully, when it was time for the showers, you and your cellmate both went. Because by that point, well, then at that point, you might not even notice it, because you both stink so bad that you just become nose blind to it. Could be an advantage in that situation. Never know. But I believe I've talked about jail enough for one day, or at least reasons why you shouldn't go. So I'm ringing the bell, and I'm going to end the main event. And here comes the spear of the week. It could only be one thing, just one thing. Spear of the week would be a situation that was just absolutely horrible about jail. And this isn't one about people going to jail. This is one about working in jail. I'm going back to lockdowns for the officers like me who worked in the corridor, or in the throats between two blocks, or the utility officers who floated around the jail. We had a lot of work to do during lockdowns. In fact, those are some of the days where we actually earned our money, because we had to run up and down stairs. We had to jump in and out of elevators, either move food. We had to take out, I don't even know how much trash, but a lot of it. You couldn't allow the nurses who would distribute the medication, the only ones who were able to touch the pills, like us officers, not allowed to touch the medicine. And rightfully so. And the nurses were not allowed to walk around the jail without an escort, rightfully so. And you had to have an officer escort a nurse who would take the medication to block to block. Usually they would have two. In my jail, we had two major uh, housing unit towers, and one nurse would do one tower, the other nurse would do the other tower. Sometimes, depending on how many nurses there were, it could just be one nurse, and you had to do the entire jail, RHU and all, which is the restricted housing unit. Another thing that I didn't get to, and maybe I will at a different time. But without a doubt, Spear of the week would be the whole concept of a lockdown for the officers. Not fun. Now, this is a segment and time where I would go ahead and I would decide to read one of those questions from that book. But today, again, is September 3rd, 2025. For those who are in the know, the NFL season begins tomorrow as I'm recording, Thursday, September 4th, 2025. And I debated it. I thought about it. And then I made a decision. I am going to do the picks again this year. My picks, 5 picks a week. And then the Super Bowl and playoffs. And that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and do the picks, my picks for the week. First one, going to be very controversial in these parts of Philadelphia where I live. But the defending Super Bowl champions, the Eagles, versus hated nemesis, Dallas Cowboys, who just recently traded their best pass rusher to the Green Bay Packers. I think that was going to actually end up being um, addition by subtraction. They got rid of Michael Parsons. And I honestly think that's going to make them better. In the long run, I think the next year or two, Cowboys are going to be better for have gotten rid of Michael Parsons. I think it's going to be a benefit to them. And I see this game being very close, but I also see the Cowboys winning 28-24. 49ers and Seahawks, my guys, versus I hate the Seahawks. Hate them. Only one team I hate more than the Seahawks, that's Rams. But I think the 49ers got this in Seattle 24-20. Giants and Commanders, well, if you listened to my show last year, you know that I'm very high on Jaden Daniels. Very high. And now he's got Deebo Samuels for whatever length of time he's going to stay healthy. They re-signed their number one wide receiver. Their defense, fairly good. And I think right now they maybe have second or third best left tackle in the league. In fact, I'm going to call him maybe the third best tackle, period, offensively in the league. With Tunzel, I would have to say Commanders are going to destroy the Giants. 38-10, my numbers. Now we're going to go into one variation of the Aaron Rodgers Bowl. Steelers versus Jets. I think, again, addition by subtraction, the Jets get rid of Aaron Rodgers, and the Jets are going to beat Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers. I believe it's going to be in a close game. Defenses are both pretty good on both teams. Hopefully they don't prove me to be a liar, but I like this one as 17 Jets, 14 Steelers. Those are my picks. One more time. Cowboys over Jets, 49ers over Seahawks, Commanders over Giants, and Jets over the Steelers. Oh, I've missed one. Detroit versus Green Bay. Detroit blows them out. I think Micah Parsons, who is not in any kind of shape to play, is going to be thrown on the defensive line in Green Bay, and he's going to get embarrassed, and so are the Packers, 35-17. Lions. Those are my picks. Now, to shut the door a little bit, you can check me out on Instagram, Philip Henderson 502. Join us. Join us. The Lip Facebook group. Join us. There's always room for one more. I'm out there on a couple other things, TikTok and X. Love X. Crazy new name for that thing. Never going to get used to it, but what am I going to say? That's just what it is, right? Right. But finally, I want to go into the words of wisdom. And very simply, the words of wisdom today are the name of the show. Don't go to jail. Doesn't get much simpler than that. Doesn't get much wiser than that. Don't go to jail. And on that note, my name is Phil, and you've just listened to The Lip.